Fire tonight. So I'm gonna tell you a little story that's been on my mind. Pull up a log as the fire burns and just listen. So they've been thinking a lot lately about time. Not the time you measure with clocks, not work schedules, not deadlines, not social media trends. I mean the kind of time you feel, the kind of time measured in old trucks sitting under pine trees, in worn out leather boots, in scars in your hands, and in old hounds with gray muzzles. Because one day, those trucks are going to rust. The old hounds will run their last trail. But the stories that you pass down to the next generation, those are going to outlive all of us. Some of the stories that you've heard me tell over the time have been stories that were passed down to me. But I think somewhere along the way, modern society forgot. We're living in a world now where everybody is chasing things that do not last. They're chasing views. They're chasing followers. They're chasing arguments, politics, outrage, money, and attention. Everybody's trying to be temporarily famous. But if you really stop and think about it, most of the people we remember, the ones who actually mattered in our lives, were never famous at all. Most of the people we remember were ordinary people. Our grandfathers, our grandmothers, old hunters, old fishermen, old farmers, old mechanics. I think now about an old mechanic that had a little shop not too far from where I grew up, and he could fix about anything. These people never had a podcast. They never had a YouTube channel. They never went viral. But somehow their stories survived anyway. I remember old men sitting around the country store drinking coffee and Pepsis. You know, the thing back then was you got a Pepsi or Coke. Some of the guys like Coke. And you open it up and you poured a pack of salted peanuts in it. And you sat there and you drink your Pepsi and you ate the peanuts at the same time. That little old store with the squeaky wooden floors, a bulletin board, nobody updated, and a group of old men that acted like they had nowhere to be. And most of them didn't. They sat around and talked about their farm. I remember one time one of the guys, last name was Cunningham, he was sitting there in the store, and he's telling the guys, he said, I just bought a new truck. And the other guys were like, yeah, you bought a new truck? He said, yeah, I bought a new truck. They said, what kind did you get? He said, I bought a nice one. He meant Nissan. I bought a nice one. And they're like, well, I know if you bought a truck, it was a nice one. No, you don't understand. It was a nice one. And I remember that old store. There was a aquarium in there, and he had some fish in the aquarium that came out of the creek close by, and he had an algae eater in there. And I remember that algae eater to this day. He just swim around there in the aquarium eating the algae, kept it clean. But back then, these people still understood something that we're losing today. Stories mattered. Not because they were profitable, not because they got clicks, but because stories carried wisdom. And a good story could teach you how to survive, how to avoid mistakes, how to understand people. A good story could help you recognize danger, help you laugh at yourself. It would also help you breathe. It could keep you, how to keep you from going back after life knocks you down flat on your back. And a lot of those stories came from hunters. Now, before somebody gets offended, slow down and actually listen. Hunters were not important because they unalived something. Hunters mattered because they spent time in places where people learned to listen. The woods have a way of teaching patience. The woods will humble you. You can't scream at a deer and win an argument with it. And you can't cancel a thunderstorm. You can't negotiate with winter. It's coming whether you want it to or not. The outdoors teaches you reality. The outdoors teaches you really whether you like it or not. And when people spend their lives out there, they develop stories that are worth hearing. That old hound laying beside the fireplace, that dog might represent 20 years of somebody's life. That old truck, if you look here in my picture, you see the old truck. I had one like that, 1950 Chevy. That old truck might have hauled 3 generations of kids to deer camp. Might have hauled them to the beach too. Those boots by the back door, they might have walked 1,000 miles through fields and swamps and cutovers. Mine have walked all through the desert of Idaho, Colorado, been to Arkansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Washington, D.C. The same boots that walked the deserts of Idaho have walked the streets of Washington, D.C. Isn't that something? But it isn't about the object. It's about the memories attached to it. And younger people sometimes don't understand that. They don't realize it. They see an old shotgun and they think, why not just buy a new one? Well, because it's not just a shotgun anymore. It's history. It's a memory. It's the sound of your father laughing. It's the sound of your grandfather teaching you safety. It's a cold morning and thermos full of coffee. It's hearing hounds strike a trail in the dark. It's the story that's attached to the object that matters. And that's the real inheritance. Not money, not property. Stories. And honestly, I think that's why society feels so hollow nowadays. We have more technology than any generation in human history. And we have less connection. People barely know their neighbors. Families sit at restaurants staring at their phones. Kids know internet influencers better than they know their own grandparents. And the dangerous part is we're losing our oral history. We're losing family stories. We're losing local culture. Every little small town in America used to have legends. My little small town I grew up in has a shad festival. Every community had characters. And that old man swore once he wrestled a bear. My daddy wrestled a deer. He really did. The woman who cooked for every church fundraiser for 40 years. She made a good casserole too, I imagine. And that old hunter whose dogs could trail anything. The fisherman who always knew where the shad were running. And every time one of those people dies, an entire library disappears. That's the tragedy nobody talks about. Not the loss of information, the loss of wisdom. That's a difference. Information tells you how to do something. Wisdom tells you why it matters. And wisdom is usually passed down through stories. That's why I write about the things I write. That's why I write Beagle Book Club and the other things. Some people think those are just children's stories about talking dogs. But they're really stories about a memory, about kindness, about loyalty, and about preserving a way of life before it disappears. Excuse me. The old voices around the campfire. The old voices around the campfire will go silent. And if nobody tells the stories, it will be like those people never existed. I think a lot about that, especially as I get older. When you're young, you think life lasts forever. And then one day you realize that you've started becoming the old guy in the story. And that changes the way you look at things. It changes the way you look at everything. You should start realizing how fast time moves. Dogs you raise from puppies suddenly have gray faces. Kids become adults. Families disappear. And you realize something important. None of us are really keeping anything. We're borrowing it. We're borrowing time. We're borrowing moments. And we're borrowing memories. And eventually, we'll hand them down to the next generation. That's our real job. Not becoming rich. Not becoming famous. Passing something worthwhile down. That's legacy. And legacy doesn't require $1 million. Some of the richest people I've ever met financially left behind absolutely nothing that mattered emotionally. Meanwhile, some old country guy with a beat-up truck and a good hound left behind stories his family still tells 30 years later. That man won. Because being remembered matters. Not internet remembered, human remembered. And there's a difference. Human remembered means somebody smiles when they hear your name. It means your grandchildren repeat your stories. It means someone you taught to survive after your heartbeat stops. That's immortality in the real world. And honestly, I think we need more of that right now. We need more grandparents telling stories. We need more families sitting on porches. Used to, you sat on grandma's porch and you shelled peas and beans. And you talked. And that was the internet of the day. We need more of that. We need more kids hearing about where they came from and their family history. We need more time unplugged from algorithms and outrage. Because the world's getting loud. And loud people usually don't leave lasting wisdom. Quiet people often do. The old hunter sitting silently by a fire, he may know more about life than half the internet combined because he's lived, he's failed, he's suffered, and he's survived. And somewhere inside those stories are truths that younger generations desperately need. Truths about resilience, truths about patience, truths about faith and loss. Truths about getting back up when life hurts you. And maybe that's why stories matter so much. Those of you who come into the live, throw me some likes in there. TikTok loves it when I get likes. Stories about how humans carry wisdom throughout time. Long after the trucks rust, long after the boots wear out, long after the hounds walk their last trail, the story remains. And maybe someday, long after we're all gone, some kid sitting around a fire will still hear about one of them. And just for a moment, we're still sitting there too. This is Todd Edwards from TicBite NC. Y'all be good to each other. And don't forget to pass the stories on. If you like this story, consider following the page, give me a like, press the share button, and share it with your friends, neighbors. Send it to somebody you don't even like. Maybe they'll get something out of it. And I'll catch you on the next one. Have a great